Chapter 12. That night, around mesquite fires scattered like bright islands up and down the riverbank, the men of the Iron Cavalry Brigade talked of Mexico. Several antelope had been killed earlier in the day. The cool desert air was fragrant with the smell of roasting meat. In the slow-moving river below, Texas stars were reflected like silver coins tossed onto the black water. "A year, not much more, and we'll be ready to head back this way," one soldier chortled, wiping scarlet meat juices from his chin with the back of his hand. "Those Yankees think the war ended just because General Lee held up a white flag at Appomattox. Well, think again, boys, we got another plan." "You tell 'em, Rowdy," someone hollered back, "and won't it be a surprise to 'em when we come riding hell for leather over this border again some fine day?" "We need to keep recruiting, though," another voice warned. "We need an army, not just a bunch of fellers with dreams of secession still burning in their brains." Tyler listened. No man talked of home. Instead, all eyes were turned towards Mexico. He shot a look at Papa. In the firelight, Black Jack's eyes were narrow and reflective. It was impossible to tell exactly what he was thinking. Papa had promised they would talk, but now he chewed his ration of charred antelope meat, preoccupied with matters Tyler could only guess at. Later, when the soldiers bedded down for the night, Tyler lay side by side with Papa. Overhead, the points of the stars had become as sharp as knives. Down the riverbank, someone played a harmonica softly. In the distance, a coyote howled. Tyler was tempted to reach out to touch Black Jack and whisper, "About going home, Papa." "No need for us to hurry. You can rest here as long as you need to." But he stayed his hand. He studied the arch of his father's shoulder, carved blackly against the dying firelight. "He's tired," Tyler reminded himself. "That's why he's so quiet. After all, he'd watched Papa work all afternoon building skiffs. Had tried to be of help himself, had seen the sweat stand out on Papa's forehead like rows of glass beads. It would be unkind to pester him tonight, Tyler decided. It would be best to wait. When they were finally alone together, though, after everyone else had crossed the Rio Grande, they'd have the pleasure of getting acquainted again. Maybe Papa would remark in greater detail about how much he'd grown, how tall he'd gotten in the past 4 years. Tyler smiled in the dark. As they headed back to Sweet Creek, Papa no doubt would tell him stories about the war, how glad he was it was over, how good it would be to be home again. Tyler savored the soon-to-come moments they would share, then touched his father so lightly on the shoulder that Black Jack never stirred. "No matter what anyone said, I knew you were still alive," Tyler told the arched black shoulder. "I knew I could find you if I tried hard enough, Papa." Against his other flank he felt Bigger's warm body. He reached out to bury his fingers in the dog's thick coat. For the first time since he left Sweet Creek, Tyler was happy. The men of the Iron Brigade were up before dawn, embroidered itself like a thin green ribbon on the black skyline. Coffee was brewed, and the soldiers ate hardtack and cold, roasted meat as they paced back and forth, wolfing their grub down as greedily as Bigger did when he was really hungry, which lately was all the time. A few men had already begun to load the skiffs with saddles, bedrolls, barrels. Before long, the first skiff was ready to be pushed off the riverbank to test how the water was running. A dozen men boarded it and with long poles began to push their way across to the other side as the rising sun briefly turned the Rio Grande into a river of blood. The current was sluggish, which meant crossing would be fairly safe, and soon another skiff was loaded. A few mules were roped together and swam across behind it. "It's going to work fine," Tyler heard Papa call out. "The rest of you boys, soon as those skiffs are pulled back here, get ready to load 'em up again. Let's be quick about this. We ain't come all this way to let Phil Sheridan and his Blue Boys put us in irons at the last minute." A moment later, Papa peeled off his hat as a man on a red horse came riding along the bank. "Ah, here comes Joe Shelby," he said, tapping Tyler on the shoulder. "Wonder what he's got on his mind today." In a moment it was clear that the general planned to do. He ordered the battle flag of the Iron Brigade spread on the ground at his horse's feet. Tyler watched as General Shelby plucked the black plume from his hatband and threw it into the stars and bars. 2 men came forward carrying a large stone, which they laid on the flag along with the general's feather. All 4 corners were wrapped around the stone. Then flag, stone, and plume were pitched into the river. A bugler played taps. The rock sank quickly while edges of the flag fluttered up. Then it too vanished beneath the dark water. A glad hurrah went up from everyone on the bank. "Ho for Mexico!" someone cried. "Louder, boys! Ho for Mexico!" Papa raised his hat in the air too, and Tyler saw Black Jack's hair was as matted and gray-streaked as his beard. "God bless us all!" he yelled. As soon as the first gifts returned, more loading was done. Sacks of flour, sugar, rice, coffee, boxes of Enfield rifles and ammunition, 3 barrels of whiskey. Tyler fell to work beside Papa. Perhaps this would be a good time to discuss a few of the things that were on his mind. "We waited to hear after the war was over, Papa," he explained. "Then I figured maybe you'd got shot and might be needing help. That's when I decided to—" "I did get shot, son," Papa announced gruffly. Tyler stared. In his letters, Papa never mentioned being wounded. "Was lucky, though. Not like some of those poor lads I saw. Boys not much older than you, Ty. Their arms, legs, faces blasted away. All I took was a bullet in the fleshy part of my leg," he admitted, pointing at his thigh. "If I'd taken it in the bone, though, I'd likely have died on the spot. If not from the wound, then from the amputation I'd have had," he went on. "It's an awful thing to watch a man get his leg sawed off with tools that ain't clean, no anesthetic to ease his pain, no proper bandages to wrap up his wound. But it was done, Ty, and I'll hear those boys' screams in my ears till I go to my grave." "You never mentioned such things in your letters, Papa," Tyler murmured, remembering what he'd read about playing baseball, about the woods with the stream running through it, the good pasture for the horses that was nearby. "Some tales are too awful to be told, son," Black Jack said, and in his father's eyes Tyler saw a reflection of events that couldn't now be unseen or unremembered. It was the same look that had been in Graybeard's eyes and in the eyes of the stranger at Sweet Creek. "Harold Crow from over on Pepper Creek, you know him, don't you, Papa? Well, he got blinded in one eye." Tyler spoke up quickly, glad at least that Papa was finally talking. "I figured I'd better come to find you in case such a thing had happened to you. But when we get back home—" Just then, down near the edge of the water, one of the horses began to buck and pitch, interrupting Tyler in mid-sentence. With white rolling eyes, it tried to turn back from the river and scramble up the bank to freedom. "Get that darn fool into the water where he belongs," Papa yelled, leaping forward and waving both arms. "We can't afford to lose a single one of those horses, boys." At the sight of Papa, the animal turned, plunged obediently into the river, and began to swim hard for the distant shore.